Howie Long joins me here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Howie?
I'm doing well, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Von Miller, a defensive player, is named the MVP of the Super Bowl. How about that one, Howie? How about that one?
Well, I didn't think it could be anyone else. I think if Carolina had found a way, and certainly I think they had opportunities to, the Kotry drop and, the Ginn bobble off the laser shot that Cam threw and that interception. They had opportunities to score, and it's a different game. And if they turn it around, you look at Coney Ely and you go 3 sacks, forced fumble, interception on his own blitz. He would have been he would have been the MVP for Carolina. So both defenses played great. I think the big difference being Carolina played really well on defense versus what you would consider to be a limited Denver offense. And Denver's defense played great versus what has been a dynamic offense throughout the course of the season, scoring over 30 points a game.
So how do they turn them into a less dynamic offense? What did you see?
I think you have to win on first down, and they brought a lot. They talk about the spy. They only spied him, as Von said, 3 times, and it was almost like a green dog. Green dog meaning they treated Cam like a running back in the spy position. So if he doesn't run with the football, you come. If he does run with the football, you're playing him on the run. They won on first down. They brought 5 a lot. I think they brought him 25 times. They brought blitzes. They pressured him 21 times. You get them into manageable situations defensively. Their coverage was great. Their tackles got somewhat exposed because when Carolina has great success offensively, they're winning on first down. They're in second and third in manageable situations, and they get their explosive plays off of play-action pass with the run fakes. The linebackers bite up, safety bites up. They've got 6 people, maybe 7 at times, in protection. So it's kind of it can lull you into a false sense of security in terms of protection, thinking, well, we're a great protection team. You're a great protection team when you're running the ball effectively and you've got 6 people, 7 people in protection on play-action passes.
Pro Football Hall of Famer Howie Long from Fox Sports also joining me here. Who does Von Miller remind you of? When you see him, you think of who, Howie?
Who? A little bit of Derek Thomas from a speed and ability to, that ability to turn the corner at that angle is really rare. And I've tried to, the Bears played him earlier in the year, and Kyle played against him, and I'm looking at him, I'm feeling, I'm going, oh, he's linebacker size, not necessarily big linebacker, but he's linebacker size. He's linebacker size with DB speed and DB athleticism. So it's as if you were bringing a defensive back at 245, 50 pounds. That's really difficult for a 320-pound person to deal with. It's one thing I think you have to have a plan to stay inside out. You've got to get some help periodically, and I don't think they gave enough help on him. There were some breakdowns in protection where they show blitz up the middle and the tackle's thinking inside and then out, and by the time he gets back out, Ware is already around Michael Orr. So it was a difficult day for their protection packages.
Did DeMarcus Ware make the Hall of Fame last night? And by that I mean this. We know how sometimes defenders can rack up the stats, and it takes them a long time to get noticed from Pro Football Hall. Kevin Green is a perfect example of that. When they rack up the number.
Happy for Kevin Green and really happy for DeMarcus Ware. And as I was watching the post-game interviews, I told my wife, that's one of the nicest guys I've ever met in professional football.
DeMarcus, you're talking about.
Yeah, one of the nicest guys I've ever met.
Well, when you get the ring, though, with the stats, then suddenly Hall of Fame Canton comes in a lot clearer focus. Do you think DeMarcus Ware's a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's like I said to Eddie DeBartolo at the Hall of Fame luncheon honoring John Madden. And I've said this to John Lynch too. John Lynch is a Hall of Famer. It's just a question of when. Kurt Warner's a Hall of Famer. It's just a question of when. And everyone gets caught up in first ballot, second ballot, third ballot, 10th, 12th, 14th, and unfortunately, for some guys, it's a tortured kind of annual rite of passage that you have to go through this anticipation where you're, the final 20, the final 14, the final 10, and it's a difficult task that the voters have, and you've got generational players, and it's difficult to kind of, how are you judging a player? Let's say a guy who's up in his first year of eligibility, he's 5 years retired, versus a guy that you looked at 15 years ago, and he's kind of been pushed to the back of the line. He's in the final 10, so it's a difficult. I think it's a difficult thing. I think he is a Hall of Famer. It's just a question of when.
Cam Newton, Howie Long, we all saw what happened post-game, and then in the game, balls on the ground, Super Bowl on the line. Cam doesn't dive for it. Dan Fouts in the first hour said he was wondering what in the world was he thinking. You're a defender. What does that tell you? Anything, or it was just a bad spur-of-the-moment reaction that you'd think wouldn't come from an MVP quarterback, Howie?
Well, I think it's probably a bad spur-of-the-moment reaction. I think he he was probably at that point, and I'm not sure what's going on in his mind, and he wasn't giving a lot of insight in terms of what was going on in his mind, other than. And I was glad he pointed out. We dropped balls, we fumbled balls, we gave up sacks. We threw errant passes, and I was happy that he included that because there was some of that, and I think his wide receiver group let him down. There were situations that they had opportunities to convert where their defense put them in good position, and they had opportunities to convert, and they didn't. And if they just convert on one of those opportunities, they make the field goal. It's a different game, and we might be having a different conversation about a dominant Carolina defense. It was really an odd game. It was kind of a throwback game, if that makes sense, where the two defenses were playing extremely well and the offenses were struggling. I mean, I think Denver went 1 for 14 on third down. That's unheard of.
So how much criticism do you think Cam deserves today?
He'll get his share of criticism. Some of it warranted, some of it, I think a bit gratuitous because, maybe someone doesn't like Cam because he celebrates too much, or, he's from a different generation. And I think it's important not to be that guy because I'm 56 years old, not understanding how today's young players play. And, I don't want to be that guy. I think if he could take something away from this game, it would be if I'm the definitive leader of the football team, I have to lead the team through good and bad. And, I have to be that guy who goes up to the podium and as the quarterback, as the definitive, clear leader of the football team, take my lumps, and I think when you look at, and I always look at great examples for young players to follow, and Peyton through good and bad, he takes his lumps. He really does. I don't know about the Budweiser thing, but that kind of that caught me off guard because I don't think there's a player who's more aware of everything that he says or the significance of the moment more than Peyton. But I think he's a great example of how you handle yourself. And there have been a lot of great quarterbacks that have, it comes with that title, that leader, that quarterback. You're the guy. You're the you're the guy that that the group looks to in times both good and bad.
So, last question for you with Stabler going in. You got a good Stabler story for me? What's your best Kenny Stabler story that's safe for work, Howie? You got one?
Well, then I have nothing for you.
That'll wrap it up.
Hey, listen. That I didn't play with Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our paths crossed one or two times, but played with a lot of guys that did play with Kenny, and all I can tell you is, you know, the guy that I work with on Sundays for 22 years, Terry Bradshaw, and they had some of the greatest, you know, rivalry games that you could possibly play in to this day. And, you know, throughout the course of our 22 years, he's always said, I feared Kenny Stabler with the ball at the end of the game more than anybody in football. He said, Kenny Stabler belongs in the Hall of Fame. Terry Bradshaw has said that from day one, and I know he was happy to hear that Kenny finally got the nod. I got to speak to his family a little bit at the Hall of Fame luncheon, and that was before the announcement was made. But I know they were hoping and anticipating that this would be the year, and it's well deserving. Kenny Stabler is one of the legendary players in our sport, and played in some of the greatest games under John Madden and with, you know, Dave Casper and Mark Van Egan and Art Shell and Gene Upshaw and Cliff Branch, and you name it. It goes on and on and on.
Yeah, I heard about this Hall of Fame luncheon. You mentioned it a couple of times, and I think it's a great idea because it seems like the Hall is trying to make the finalist group a little bit more special, that guys who are named finalists and actually make it to the Super Bowl venue just in case they are named the next night don't feel like they've lost out on something, even though they may feel that way. It seems like the Hall is doing a little bit more to expand this list.
Yeah, I think David Baker is doing some really good things. You know, the thing that I'm always sensitive to, and I've made this point to the Hall of Fame, that it's the Aaron Rodgers effect. You know, it's the guy who you think is going to get in, and he's there, and the cameras are on him, and you're following him, and suddenly, you know, the votes come in, and he's pushed back in the draft, and, you know, you're looking for the awkward, you know, facial expression or physical gesture, whatever. You know, so I think we have to be respectful of those players that don't get in, who are in the top 10, who are finalists, who, you know, are it's the equivalent of what you see. You know, I equate the Super Bowl to climbing Everest, and two teams are right there, right at the summit, and one team gets the flag, and the other team has to go back down the mountain and start again. And I think in many cases, these players, they get their hopes up, their families get their hopes up. In some cases, these players are older players who've been waiting a long time, and they don't hear their name called. And you know, it can be a difficult day.
Howie, I appreciate the time, as always. It is great to chat with you, and we'll get you back on hopefully in the spring. We'll talk about the return of Los Angeles football and return of a long playing in Los Angeles football and things of that nature.
You have a great one. I know it's been a busy week. I hope your week was good.
It was great, Howie. Thank you. Thanks for saying that.
Partner.
I appreciate it. You bet. Same to you. That's Pro Football Hall of Famer Howie Long. If Peyton Manning had a deal with Budweiser, I don't care. By the way,
I don't either.
I don't care. I don't care.
He did this before, though. He said Bud Light a couple of years ago.
That's
at one of
fine.
These things.
That's fine. Because players are not allowed, active players are not allowed to have beer deals. If he's got a Budweiser deal in his back pocket and he's using this platform to promote it.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.